Due to a private event, the second floor of Nintendo New York City will be closed at 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday, January 15th. This came from a tweet from Nintendo. And of course, because there's been rumors of a direct floating around, everybody assumes, not everybody, but a lot of people assume that this means that there's something big happening on the 15th. Now, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but this has been done before. There's been times where Nintendo has closed parts of that store in order to have like a private party or in order to have a meeting with a bunch of people. So just because this is happening does not mean that we've definitely got something going on. Okay. I think that there's still a chance that we can get a January Direct. My guess a couple weeks ago was that it would be on the 18th. It's the 13th today, so hopefully sometime this week we'll find out something. But, you know, even if we don't get a Direct, it's kind of funny how people have changed how they feel about this. When people when Nintendo started doing the Nintendo Directs, a lot of people were saying, oh man, this is a mistake. Nintendo is not doing their, a live thing. And really at the end of the day, what it ended up happening is that Nintendo took a lot of pressure off the big announcements of the year. Things like E3. Things like the Game Awards, although was the Game Awards around when that started? I'm not sure. The Game Awards has kind of turned into like a smaller miniature E3 at the end of the year for announcements. But Nintendo, because of what they've done here with the Nintendo Directs, they've taken all of the pressure off them having to deliver, an amazing announcement at E3, because we know that the next announcement is always just a little bit away. And by doing that, they take the pressure off any one announcement by spreading their announcements over a longer period of time. I think that it's the right move. And even if we don't get a Nintendo Direct in January, the next Direct is coming soon. We don't know when, but I'm sure it's coming soon. And Nintendo is going to tell us all about the things that they are going to be revealing for the year. And I'm really excited to hear about that stuff, as I'm sure you guys are. In addition to that, let's talk about what could they talk about at a Nintendo Direct. Well, this is a very, very interesting tweet. I found this over on Resetera, which is a website forum about video games. And this is there's a Twitter user named Cappuccino Heck, and I guess they are a data miner. Now, if you don't know what a data miner does, they look into files that are on systems, and they try and pull information out of those files. And what kind of information did they find? Well, here's what they said. Oops, I missed the button. Here we go. Here's what they said. They said, I was finally able to look around the NES Online strings a bit myself and noticed the sheer amount of Super Nintendo games planned. Here's a list for you folks out there. Hashtag Nintendo Switch. And then we've got the list. It says Super Mario Kart, Super Soccer, Zelda Link to the Past, Demon's Crest, Yoshi's Island, Stunt Race FX, Kirby's Dream Course, Poppin' Twin Bees, Star Fox, Contra 3, Kirby Superstar, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Kirby Dream Land 3, Super Metroid, Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, and F-Zero. Star Fox 2, Super Punch-Out, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, Super Mario All-Stars, and Breath of Fire 2. And then he dropped the paste bin, which had all of that information in it. when we look at this information, there's a lot of people who are going to look at this and they're going to say, oh my God, Nintendo's bringing Super Nintendo games to the Nintendo Switch, which is what we've been asking for a while now. I'm not the only one that wants Super Nintendo games on the Switch. Especially, I recently kind of ranted about how I felt about what we were paying for with Nintendo Switch Online. I felt like Nintendo wasn't really justifying the purchase price that we were giving to them. Although most of us are willing to do it just because we want to be able to play the games online. If Nintendo did this, and this is certainly not confirmation that they are, but if Nintendo did this, what I would see as a really good move is every month bring out a couple or a few NES games, as well as a couple or a few Super Nintendo games. That would really entice people to play a lot more, or to pay a lot more. Because at the end of the day, when you compare the Super Nintendo to the NES, the Super Nintendo, I believe, and I think most would probably agree with me, although if you disagree, feel free to let me know. I think most would probably agree that the Super Nintendo had better games on it. The NES saved the video game industry from certain doom. The NES saved the video game industry, but the Super Nintendo built upon that and gave us some of the greatest games that have ever existed. To this day, one of my favorite games of all time is Zelda for the Super Nintendo. I adore that game. I've finished it multiple times. It blew me away when it came out, and I would love to be able to play that on the go on my Nintendo Switch. But this is information that is data mined. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can look at this. One way you could look at this is that Nintendo, I don't know much about this, but from what I've read, it seems like Nintendo basically took their emulator that they have on the NES Classic, and they ported their emulator over to the Nintendo Switch in order to do the NES games on there. Now, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but maybe there was some leftover code. Like perhaps Nintendo was working on stuff for the Super Nintendo Classic already, and they used the same emulator to bring stuff over. I really don't know. But I think that, even people who say, well, this is just leftover information, some of these games are not games that are on the Super Nintendo Classic. So it's not just a case of them bringing over information from one place where they were working on one thing and then just porting it over to something else just to save on reinventing the wheel. But there's things on this list that are not part of the Super Nintendo Classic, and that's pretty interesting. Like Super Soccer, it's not part of it. I don't think Demon's Crest is either. I don't think Stunt Race FX is part of that either. Poppin' Twin B's not there either because I've never heard of it. So I really, really hope that this is true. But I also think that you should take this as a rumor and not news. It's a rumor you should take with a grain of salt, or actually maybe a bag of salt. Just because this guy says that he data mined this information out of the NES Online strings, which I don't really know what that means, doesn't mean that he's right. Doesn't mean that he's being truthful. He could just be making stuff up. I'm not saying that he is making stuff up. I'm just saying, calm your horses. Don't get excited. It might not come to fruition, but if it does, and this list is true, I know that there's some people who are going to look at this list and they're going to notice the one game that they really wanted on there that's missing. and I understand that. But if this is true, I think it's a much more interesting prospect to pay for NES games and SNES games and online functionality and the ability to play some of these games online. Like, F-Zero didn't really have it. Did F-Zero have a multiplayer mode? I don't know that it did. I think it did. I would love to be able to play F-Zero online. I would love to be able to play Super Mario Kart online. But I think what I'd be most excited for is playing Contra 3 online. My son and I sat down and tried to play Contra 3 on my Super Nintendo Classic and did not go well. The game is really, really hard, and he doesn't have any nostalgia for this stuff, so he didn't want to stick around and try and figure this stuff out, and he wasn't interested in keeping playing. And I could play it by myself, but Contra 3 is really a game where I feel like you'd have way more fun playing with somebody, so I just wasn't interested. Being able to play it online through the Nintendo Switch online Super Nintendo Entertainment System app, I think that would be fantastic. And I'm very interested in this. I hope that it's true. Fingers crossed. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think it's true? Do you think it's false? What do you think of the list? What games do you think are missing? When I look at this list, the very first game that jumps out to me that's missing is Earthbound. Earthbound's not on this list. Final Fantasy VI is not on this list. But at the same time, both of those games are on the Super Nintendo Classic. So again, there's games on this list that are not from the Super Nintendo Classic, and there's games on this list from the Super Nintendo Classic that are missing. So I don't think that this is simply a port issue. I think that this is lends a little bit of credence to this rumor. Anyway, let me know what you guys think.